So you set up OpenClaw through a VPS like Hostinger and thought, cool, I'm running it on a separate system, so I must be good on security. And then you ran a quick OpenClaw security audit and to your surprise, found critical vulnerabilities. If you're running OpenClaw on a VPS, it's important that you put in place these security measures. Because OpenClaw has access to your business and personal tools, you probably want that locked up from outsiders. So today, I'm going to walk you through how to set up OpenClaw on a VPS the right way, with baseline security measures that you actually need to implement. You'll need to do a bit of work on the terminal, but don't worry, I'll explain each step in plain English so you actually know what you're doing and not just copying commands, even if you have zero technical background. Real quick, if you're new here, what is OpenClaw and why are we installing it on this thing called VPS? You can think of OpenClaw as a powerful 24/7 AI assistant that you can access through your messaging apps. It can send emails, book meetings, buy tickets, as long as you give it the right tools. And because it's that capable, most people don't want to run it on their personal computers, where it would have root or full access to everything that is on your machine. Instead, they run it on an external system like a Mac Mini or a VPS, a virtual private server, which is essentially an isolated computer in the cloud. If anything goes wrong, your personal file and computer stays untouched. The catch is, setting up a VPS comes with security enforcements that are easy to miss if you're not familiar with it. So in this video, we'll go through the setup together, whether you're starting afresh or already have OpenClaw running on your VPS. Follow along and I'll explain everything that we're doing every step of the way. But before we begin, if you find videos like these useful, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps a lot. Now let's dive right in. So if you've never set up OpenClaw on a VPS like Hostinger, well, the easiest way for you to do that is actually to literally type in on Google Hostinger OpenClaw, right? And then you're going to be led to this page. So I've run through this part before, so I'm going to keep it brief. All right, but if you want to check out my previous video, I'll link up here and down in the description below as well. So as the name suggests, it's super easy. It is a one-click deployment. The moment you hit the plan, it's going to ask you basically for your credit card details and your checkout. And essentially at the end of that, you're going to get a VPS spun up. And again, if you're having trouble checking out here because it says 24 months and that's a lot of money right away, you can actually change this to 1 month. So once you go ahead and spin that up, you're actually going to have a OpenClaw instance running. But for whatever reason, if you already have a hosting account going and you don't have an OpenClaw project deployed, what you can do is go over to your VPS right here. If you've already spun up one, if you haven't, go ahead and deploy a VPS. So what you want to do is go over to Manage and head over to Docker Manager and under Projects, and you should see your OpenClaw project running. If you deployed it before, but you haven't, just hit Compose, and the one-click deploy option is over here. And under Template, you can easily type in OpenClaw, and you see that it pops up, and you can hit Deploy. And once you hit Deploy, there's a couple of fields that you need to fill in, right? So the OpenClaw gateway token is by default generated, so you can take a look at that and copy and place it somewhere safe, but there's also an easy way for you to grab it later on. And these are just the keys for the LLMs that you'll need to run as the brain of OpenClaw. As you can see, there are a couple of models that you can pick from. So today we're just going to use OpenAI as the model. So the way you do that is go over to platform.openai.com. And if you don't already have an account, sign up, log in, and put in your billing details, and essentially come over to the API key section over here and create a new secret key. So I'm going to call this OpenClaw demo key. All right, so I'm going to hit create key. And it's going to give me an API token here, which I'm going to copy. Of course, I'm going to revoke this after the recording. And then you want to head back to your VPS hosting a page and literally just copy that API key into OpenAI API key. Or if you're grabbing it from Anthropic, do the same over there and hit deploy. Right. So as the project's been deployed, that's going to take maybe a couple of minutes, depending on how quick that's being spun up. But while that's deploying, what's worth understanding is that when Hostinger is building in the background, it's actually building not only just the VPS and OpenClaw, it's also building up the infrastructure that is important in supporting the entire system, right? So the most important piece of that is something called a Docker container. And here's the best way to think about it. Your VPS is like an apartment building, your own. You own the building, is your isolated space, separated from everyone else. Now inside the building, Docker creates a self-contained unit, like a fully furnished studio apartment with its own logs, its own utilities, its own everything. OpenClaw lives inside that studio. It has everything it needs to run, completely separated from the rest of the building. So why does that matter? Because if something goes wrong inside the studio, say OpenClaw misbehaves or hacked and taken over by somebody else, it doesn't affect the rest of the building. And it doesn't affect your personal machine outside the building or with VPS. So when you open your terminal and connect it to your VPS, you're standing at the lobby of the building. To actually interact with OpenClaw, you need to step into the studio. So this is just a simple mind map that I think is important as we go through the next few concepts in this video. So just keep in mind that there are two layers involved, especially when it comes to the terminal. The VPS layer, which is the building at the lobby of the building, and then stepping into the unit, which is the studio, which is the Docker container that OpenClaw lives inside. This will make sense in a few minutes. So now you see that the project has been spun up inside the VPS. So this is essentially the Docker container that we're talking about, right? So the first thing you can do is you can hit the Open Gateway option here. And the moment you do that, it's going to ask for a gateway token. And what you want to do is just click on the gateway token over here. Wait a couple seconds. It's going to copy it to your clipboard. Come back and paste the gateway token into the field. And there you go. You are now logged in. As you can see, it says health okay. And you can even chat with it. Hello. There you go. It just came online. And then, of course, what you want to do is also connect it to your messaging apps like WhatsApp or Telegram. It's pretty easy to do that. I'm not going to cover that today because I think most of you already know how to do that. So the one thing that you'll notice here as I logged in through the browser is that at the top of the browser, it says not secure. And this is because we're accessing it through the HTTP access. So what is the HTTP access? There are two types of access that you can establish to your gateway, right? There's HTTP and HTTPS access. These are both ways of sending data between your browser and the server. In this case, between your browser and your OpenClaw. And the difference between HTTP and HTTPS is encryption. So HTTP sends everything in plain text. Your API keys, your credentials, your commands, they're all visible to anyone who intercepts it along the way. Think of it like sending a letter with a clear plastic envelope. The mail carrier, anyone in the sorting facility, anyone who's handling your mail, they can all read what's inside. HTTPS is that same letter, sent in a sealed lockbox. Only you and the recipient have the key, so even if someone intercepts it in the middle, they're not going to be able to access the box and it's useless to them. Right now, by default, OpenClaw is accessible over HTTP, the clear plastic envelope. So we're going to fix that, right? But on top of the concerning fact that it says not secure over here, if you go back to your Hostinger and hit on the top right-hand corner of the terminal here, it will lead you to a terminal level at the VPS layer. So a terminal, you can think of it like a text representation of what you usually work with, what we call the UI, right? The user interface. So all these things that are appearing on your screen, which has a nicely designed user interface, actually on the back end, we can do the same thing by typing in commands. Of course, it's a lot harder for non-technical folks, which is why we try to stay off the terminal as much as possible. But however, with security hardening, sometimes you do have to get into the terminal. And it does look intimidating at first, but don't worry, I'm going to take you through it step by step and explaining every step of the way. So right now in the terminal, you're accessing it at the VPS layer, which is the building lobby layer, right? So the way you would check how many containers are actually running in the building or how many studio units exist in the building is to run a Docker command called Docker PS, right? And again, I am going to put every single command that I type in here into a document that I'm going to link down in the description below, so you don't have to take any notes. You can just copy and paste if you like. So when you run Docker PS, it tells you that, hey, these are the containers that are running. So there's a container ID, there's the image, there's the command, when it was created, and then there's the ports, right? So the ports are like doors. So you can imagine that the building, which is the VPS, has its own doors, and the Docker container also have its own sets of doors, which is why you see that it has a few sets of ports right here, right? So now at the building layer, I want to step into the studio unit, which is the Docker container. And the way I would do that is I would run another Docker command called docker execute space -it space Docker container ID, right? So I can grab the Docker container ID from here, copy that, and paste it right over here, and end that with the word bash. And when I do that, you'll see that something changed in basically the string of characters here. And essentially, you have successfully stepped into the studio unit, and you're now inside the Docker container, right? And when you're inside the Docker container, you can now interact directly with OpenClaw. Because before, when you were in the lobby, you can't actually talk to OpenClaw directly, right? So you can say, for example, OpenClaw Security Audit. So this is an OpenClaw command. I'm telling OpenClaw to run a security audit. There you go. So it's giving me back the security audit. And the thing that you want to pay attention to is really the OpenClaw summary of the security audit. As you can see, there is one critical security vulnerability and 3 warned security vulnerabilities. So under critical, you'll see what the issue is. The gateway control UI device Auth is disabled, which is essentially what we saw earlier, that it allows HTTP access into the OpenClaw control gateway, which is a control dashboard that controls our OpenClaw. So what you want to do, you want to go back to your Docker manager on Hostinger right here and hit manage, because we're going to just change a couple of things. Actually, it's just one thing in the YAML editor. And What is a YAML editor? Well, think of YAML editor like a recipe sheet, right? So in order to cook up the Docker container together with the OpenClaw, you need the recipe on how to cook it up, right? So for example, defining the services is OpenClaw, the image, the ports, which doors to open and stuff like that. So it's just a configuration file for Docker to follow as it spins up the container and the project. So you see a bunch of lines here, but essentially the part that you want to change is just the port part, which here you will type in literally 127.0.0.1. So I'll explain exactly what it means in a minute. But the next thing you want to do is for the port at the end over here, just take that away and replace that with a 187.89. All right, so what does this all mean? So 127.0.0.1 is basically a default port that's telling the system that's within the local environment. So it's not publicly accessible from outside, just in the internet, right? So 127.0.0.1 is only listening to things that are within the local environment, within the local system, in this case, within the VPS or container. And after that, the first port number or the first door number, that is actually the door at the VPS layer. That is at the building layer. So we're going to let Hostinger decide what that port is. The last port here, we've changed it to 187.89 because 187.89 is a default port that OpenClaw listens to, right? So if you don't hard code this, a lot of times it might not be reliable. And sometimes people will be hit with recursive rejection and stuff like that because the configuration is just all wrong, right? So you want to make sure that it says 127.0.0.1, the port, and 187.89 just because this is the default for OpenClaw, right? Again, I'll copy all this right in the document and link it down below. All right, so once you do that, you want to hit deploy, right? And wait a couple seconds as it spins up. And once that's restarted, you'll see that if you pull down the Docker container here, the port number has changed, right? So previously it was 491.32 to 491.32, now it's 491.32 to 187.89, which is what we want. Now let's go back to that terminal that we've opened. Now you see that the connection is closed. So I'm just gonna close this and hit the terminal again, right? And here we're gonna type in Docker PS just to check, the container is running and everything. As you can see, the container is all here. So the next step might look slightly intimidating, but honestly, this is the only tricky part, and I'm gonna paste the entire code chunk in the document below, so don't worry about taking any notes like that. What you wanna do is you wanna run this command right here. And what essentially this is doing is it's solving one issue that often happens. So it's the issue of forwarding the port number from the VPS layer to the Docker container layer. And without going into too much technical details, this is basically making sure that OpenClaw within the container is listening to all ports within the container and essentially solves for forwarding issues and the confusion of the ports in between. So this is an essential step because we're essentially avoiding any lockout if the configurations happen to change. Here, when you paste it in, there is one part that you want to make sure to update, which is the OpenClaw BVVF, as you can see here. You want to replace this with your OpenClaw name, which is the OpenClaw-8 cap over here, right? So I'm gonna just copy this and paste it over right in the middle here. So it says OpenClaw-8 cap. Okay, so we're gonna hit enter, and then it should set the gateway to bind equals LAN, right? So this is essentially telling OpenClaw to listen to all the ports and not just singular port within the container. So once you do that, you just wanna do a quick restart. So you're gonna run the command docker restart, and copy the names, which is the container name over here. So Docker restart this particular Docker container, right? So there you go, that container has been restarted. And one thing I want to point out, the moment you change the YAML editor and the port over here, you'll see that you're now logged off or basically disconnected from your OpenClaw gateway dashboard. So you can see the health is offline, and that's totally normal, right? Because now we're not able, or people aren't able to access this gateway, this port, through HTTP access, because we've now configured the port number here. So if our HTTP access to the gateway is offline, how then do we access the gateway, right? It's great that people can access it, but how am I gonna access it? So what you wanna do, you wanna go over to your terminal. So I'm on a Mac. So what I wanna do is go over to my apps and type in terminal and hit the app, the terminal app, and then it's gonna pop up, right? So you realize that this looks very similar to the terminal that we have here, but the difference is the terminal here, you access it through Hostinger, but the terminal over here is the terminal on your computer, right? So this is not yet connected to anything. So how do we connect it to your OpenClaw gateway? Well, we have to connect it to your VPS first. right? So this is where we're going to SSH into the VPS. You can think of SSH as a secure way to tunnel into your VPS or connecting your computer to the server. So the way you SSH from your terminal is literally type in, and I'm going to blow this up so it's easy for you guys to see. So SSH space -L space, and here you want to take the port number 49132. So I'm going to open up my terminal. So that's 49132 $127.0.0.1. Again, this is all going to be in the document. And then 49132. And then space root at. So root is basically I'm signing in as a root user or SSH in as a root user to the IP address. So how do we get the IP address? We go over to your Hostinger dashboard, and then we go over to the VPS. And as you can see, there's an IPv4 address over here. We're just going to copy that and then go back to the terminal and paste that in, right? So I'm going to hit enter. So it's asking for my password. I've signed in or SSH in before, but if this is your first time SSH into this particular VPS, it's going to say that it didn't recognize this particular connection and whether you're sure you want to go ahead and you want to type in a yes, right? And just enter. The password itself, where can you get this? The password you can get from the VPS, and you want to hit the three dots here and you want to hit settings, and then you can actually generate a new password. You can hit save, give it a few seconds to actually set in, and then copy that password and paste it into the terminal. The moment you paste in, it's not going to show anything because that's just a default setting. It's not going to show you the password. Just hit enter, right? And this means that you've logged into or SSH into the VPS. And if you were to look at the terminal that I've accessed through Hostinger, you'll see that it is the same root user as the SSH, right? It's the 1352462, and here it says 1352462. So essentially now we are at the same building, at the same lobby, just that this is accessed through my computer, my local computer by SSH in, and this is through Hostinger right here, right? So once you have SSH in, you can now actually access the gateway through your browser, right? So what you want to type in is just type in 120.0.0.1 and your port number, right? So you want to type in 49132. Okay, so this is accessing it locally through your system. So right now you're considered to be local in the system. The first time you access the gateway through SSH, it's going to say that the device identity is required. So this is where you want to go to the overview here, and you want to paste in the gateway token, right? So again, the same way that you got your gateway token earlier, you want to copy the gateway token from the OpenClaw project, go back to the same instance and paste the gateway token in, and then hit connect. And now as you can see, it's connected. And if you go back to the chat, the previous chat history is there. So where you want to go from here is go over to config, and under all settings, you want to scroll down all the way to the gateway section, right? And under the gateway section, scroll further down, and you see that there are two toggles that are turned on by default, which is the insecure control UI auth, and as well as dangerously disable control UI device auth, right? So you want to turn off both of these, but before you turn off the insecure control UI auth toggle, you want to turn off the dangerously disable control UI device auth first, just to make sure that you're not locked out and stuff like that. And after you do that, you want to hit apply, and you'll see that the health is now offline, is disconnected, 1006, no reason, but it will say that pairing is required. So if you go over to overview, you'll see that after being disconnected for a while, you'll say that pairing is required. The device needs pairing approval from the gateway host OpenClaw devices list. Now, what does that mean? So it means that we have to go back to the terminal that we accessed from Hostinger here. And remember, we are at the lobby layer right now, right? We're at the lobby of the VPS. So run docker ps command, and it's going to show the container ID again because I don't want to scroll back up and get the container ID. But here we want to docker execute the container ID. So again, this is the same command that we ran earlier, which is trying to get into the Docker container, which is where OpenClaw lives. And here we are at the studio apartment where OpenClaw lives. And here we want to do an OpenClaw devices list, right? So now we can talk to OpenClaw and we run an OpenClaw command. How did I get the command? Well, essentially what the gateway says, right? OpenClaw devices list. And here it says that there's a pending request from this particular device, right? So what we're going to do is we want to do an OpenClaw devices approve this request ID right here. So we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it and we're going to hit enter. There you go. It's approved this particular request, right? And essentially where I'm just following the commands right here, right? But again, I'm going to put it all in the documents so it's easy for you guys to follow. But now that this particular devices has been approved, you'll see that the health is now have come online, back online, and essentially we have an active session for the gateway that we ran through SSH, right? So now we're going to go back to config, and again, in all settings, we want to go to the gateway section and turn off the other one, which is the insecure control UI auth toggle, right? So we're going to hit turn off here, toggle it off, and we're going to hit apply. All right. Again, it's going to say health offline for a few seconds, and then it's going to reload. And if you go back to overview, now it's reconnected again. All right. So now let's go back to our terminal, which is a terminal that we accessed through Hostinger. And here we're going to run OpenClaw Security Audit again to see what's changed. So as you can see I'm going to blow this up. In the OpenClaw Security Audit, the critical vulnerabilities has been removed. So we've successfully removed that one critical vulnerability that allows HTTP access over internet. But then there's still 2 warned vulnerabilities that we probably want to take care of. So the 2 warned vulnerabilities are basically the gateway auth rate limit as well as the permissions. And it's easy to configure this. Go back to your gateway over here, and then again, go back to config. And under all settings, just go back to your gateway section, and you'll find the gateway auth rate limit. Hit that particular bar, and then it will have a drop down like this. And there are 3 things that you want to configure, which is the lockout, the max attempts, and the length of the time that the window stays open, right? And you can get, the recommended numbers, or you can just follow essentially what OpenClaw suggested here, right? Max attempts 10, and windows open 60,000. So this is in milliseconds, so this is just 60 seconds. And lockout is 300,000 milliseconds, which is just about 5 minutes, right? So let's put in the numbers that OpenClaw suggested. And essentially what we're doing here, we're specifying the number of max attempts, the period or how long the windows for logging in stays open, and how long it's going to stay there before it logs the attempt out, right? So the reason why we want to set all of this is because if you have outside attack that are trying to break in, they're not going to be able to do this indefinitely. So we're going to hit apply here. So that's updated. Cool. Okay, so let's run the OpenClaw Security Audit again. And then this time it should show that there we go. 2 warning became 1 warn. So now we just have to take care of the permissions one here. So this is a slightly lighter one. It's just good practice. Right now, by default, OpenClaw has a pretty open permission settings. So what we want to do is just finding the permissions to access files, to go in and be able to change stuff. And how we do that is to run a particular command here, chmod 600/data. Basically, this is where the files live, right? Chmod just means change mode, and we're changing the permission here. 600, these 3 digits. The first one, 6, means the permission for the owner, and 6 represents read plus write. So the owner can actually read and write. Obviously, we want to have access for that. The second one is for groups. So we're not giving any permissions to the group, is 0. And the third one is members, and we're also not giving any permissions to members. So we're gonna just hit enter on that. And again, these are all going to be in the document, so you don't have to copy anything right now. And the second line that we're going to run here is just making sure that the file's configuration for the permission is correct. So now that you've run those 2 lines, what you can do is run the OpenClaw Security Audit again. And this time when you run the audit, you'll see that under OpenClaw Security Audit, the summary is 0 critical, 0 warn, and 1 info, right? The info is essentially just letting you know what the attack surfaces is and stuff like that. It's more informational. So great, at this point, you've cleared the critical and warning findings from the security audit, locked down HTTP access, secured your credential files, and protected your Hostinger account. For most non-technical users running OpenClaw on VPS, this is a solid foundation. That said, I want to be straight with you. This isn't the full picture. Beyond this, the next level of protection is SSH hardening. Things like disabling password login entirely and enforcing key-only access. So even terminal connection is locked down. It's more involved, and I didn't want to make this video twice as long. But if you want me to do a dedicated video on SSH hardening, walking through it the same way, step by step in plain English, let me know in the comments. I'll make that the next one. If you found this video valuable, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.